Okay, a couple little things here. While the pistons are sufficient to hold the hood up, it's not, in any danger of coming down. They hold the weight just fine. All the additional weight of the extra sheet metal on top has caused it to not want to pop up very high. Normally there's a little spring in here and it just kicks it up, and that allows you to get your fingers underneath the hood to pull that latch. Well, it's exaggerated because I haven't folded the lip yet, but either way, it wasn't really popping up very high, maybe 1/4 of an inch, and then you'd have to pick it up with your nails. That's not a good thing. So I went with an old-time solution, which is just to add a spring to the bottom of the hood over here, and it rests right on this, which goes all the way down to the radiator core support, so it's got plenty of support. And so now when I put the hood down, it compresses this spring over here, and when I pull the release, it pops up good enough so you get your hands in there and you're able to lift the hood. It's little knickknacks like that not very glamorous, but they take up a lot of time. Okay, so for anyone who followed my Dodge Charger project, this should be familiar to you, or maybe not. This is a cradle that I built for the hood so that I could work on the bottom side of the hood without it, putting any stress on the top skin. I have to do the same now for this car to work on the substructure and make sure that it retains the shape that it has right now on the car. So as you can see here, these are the side profiles of the hood. This is a very flat hood, you can see from the Dodge Chargers by comparison. And then this has a little bit of a crown to it also over here. You can see the crown here, that's the front. This is the rear of the hood. And again, this is the side profile of the hood. This just sits on the bench upside down. It supports the hood upside down and allows me to work on it without putting any stress. And it's very important on this particular hood because of the details that I have on this hood. I don't want to crush anything by hammering and banging and not having the edges supported. So what I've got to do first in order to create those 4 profiles is initially I just take and bend up some sheet metal, some 023 in a 90-degree 1x1, and then I'll take the shakers and stretchers over there and I will contour it. That's a whole lot easier than trying to cut out a pattern out of paper a little bit at a time and then piecing it together, which is another method for doing that. But this way I just lay it right on the hood, and when it's contacting the hood just the way I like it, then I'll move on to the next section. But that's the next phase of this operation here, and then I'll have to get the hood off of the car and get it set upside down over here on the bench, or maybe over on those horses, depending on the situation. Anyway. Okay, so this is basically what I was getting at. I'm taking a rough pattern here. Doesn't have to be a glove fit, it just has to support it about 80%. And you can see that just shrunk it or stretched this over this edge here, pieced it together, a couple tack welds, and this is what I'll use to transfer the pattern onto the plywood that I'll be using for this perimeter. I'm a little bit further forward from the back than I'd like to be, but because of this detail here and my method of taking patterns, I couldn't come across here. So anyway, that's the direction I'm heading in right now. Okay, so now I'm just taking the pattern that I took off the car, and I'm transferring it to a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and I'll cut that out, and I'll do that 3 more times to create the entirety of the perimeter, and then I'll put it all together. Alright, so this is my woodworking project. You can see how it supports both the edges and also across the profile in the back and the profile in the front. And I'll lay this upside down on the table and drop the hood upside down into this, and It'll be fully supported when I hem over all these edges. Also, it'll keep from scooting away. It's not so hard to work on a flat hood, but something with all this contour in it, you know, you'd have to be setting up pillows and bags and things and everything to keep it from scooting away, which is fine, but I prefer it to be sitting on a stable surface. And so while this might look like a little bit of overkill, it's better just to be concentrating on the job at hand than to be worrying about the hood flying off the table because you have it inadequately supported, or damaging the top of the skin because it's sitting on top of something that you inadvertently left on the bench, which has happened to me before, so I'm sure you can sympathize. Anyway, see where we go from here. Well, here's something that looks ridiculous. I just had to put the old wheels back on this car because I'm getting ready to move it around here in the next week or so. So put some temporary wheels on it to get it maybe over to the spray room. But anyway, this is what the original wheels look like as far as the difference between the width of the body and where the old wheels ended up. That's pretty crazy. Anyway, on this side over here, I had one of my SRT8 wheels from the 2006 Charger, and you can see that it's a bit lost too. And the reason the ones in the front look even halfway decent is because there's a 1-inch spacer behind them. Anyway, those other wheels will fill it out pretty good though. Don't worry about that. Okay, one of the disadvantages of having to work by myself here is lifting heavy objects, awkward, large, heavy objects off the car. So I came up with this device a little while ago. I've only used it once. I used it on my pickup truck to stabilize the hood, to pull the fender off the truck and leave the hood in midair, basically. All it is it fits into the end of, this is usually the place where the chain hooks up. There's some 2x2 tubing. It slides right into this. This is an engine hoist, a regular old engine hoist. Anyway, a couple of plates, 3/16 of an inch thick, and there's a welded nut on the top over here, and so you can tighten this down. You can swing these arms out to whatever angle you need. Right now I've got these plates welded on them that I'll be able to attach to the hood over here. These loosen up over here. This is some heavy wall. I believe this is 049. No, I think this is 065 wall. I sanded it all down so that it would slip fit in here and slide back and forth. Again, I've got a lock nut over here to keep this from moving in and out once I get it adjusted. So this also, basically a couple of 1/4-inch plates here holding the whole thing to a piece of 2x2, and then this has a bolt on the back also, or a nut that's captured, and so I can tighten this with a wrench and hold it to the angle so it doesn't pivot on me, because that would be a disaster. And so I'm getting ready to attempt to remove this hood by myself with this gadget. What I have done is, if I can swing around here for a minute, is I've welded in some pickup points. These are just 1/4-20 nuts that have been flush welded in here, and there's one here, one there, and 2 on the other side. And so those plates will come in here, and I'll bolt to those 4 locations, and hopefully it'll give me enough leverage. They're spaced off the center of the hood. It's probably not the exact weight center, but it's close enough, and hopefully I can get this hood off and out of harm's way without doing any damage to the windshield. I've got that already protected by these foam pads down in the corner. Keep it from sliding back into the glass, which is my nightmare. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. We'll see on the flip side. All right, that went surprisingly well. So there it is, suspended up in the air. I was able to I thought it was going to slide back, but it actually stayed right in position, and I was able to just fold the hinges down and then pull the whole thing straight off the car. So now my next test of this thing is to drop it down to the ground and loosen the pivot here and see if I can't flip the whole hood over so that I can rest it in that jig over there, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so that wasn't too crazy flipping it over. I just had to take my time, just relieve the pressure on that one bolt there. I didn't want to let it go all at once. I got it close enough to the ground that if it dropped, it wouldn't be catastrophic. And then as soon as I got it to the point where I knew I could clear these legs, I just loosened that bolt up a little bit and just eased it upside down. It didn't seem like it was too unbalanced, so I'll just lift it back up and drop it into that fixture over there then. Okay, so far so good. Seems to be rested in there without distortion. That was what I was after. So, like I said, it seems like overkill, but now it's fully supported on the skin side, and I can remove this understructure and finish working on that. Finish welding it up in places that were inaccessible before. Also work on some of this understructure of the skin that had some issues that I couldn't reach before I put the two halves back together. Anyway, I'm waiting for some insulation blanket also that I want to put into all of these openings over here. Got a sheet of that on the way, and hopefully all goes well with that. When I sandwich these two together, there won't be too big of a buildup. Either way, I can always strip off some layers of that fiberglass if it doesn't work out. Okay, so I just finished sprucing up the underside of the upper skin. Finished welding some things I couldn't access, like the bottom side of these little trays that are at the end of the vent holes, and so that's all sealed up now. Also, I drilled some breathing holes to allow moisture and air in and out of these little details that are on the hood. I didn't want to get any moisture trapped in there or have any expansion and contraction issues with the heat of the engine, so just letting them breathe with some little holes there. Finished up welding up the edges where these pieces come together, ground off some of the seams, some of the welding that came through the bottom side. Again, around the back edge, dollied that all so that it's consistent, and mended the two ends to the power bulge. Just a lot of little knick-knack stuff that had to be done just to clean the underside before I can throw some primer on it and join these two halves together. Speaking of the two halves, I thought I could, once I got this thing in this cradle here, that I could just take my clecos out and lift this piece out by hand and just set it on the bench. Well, still too cumbersome for the weight of it, so I had to employ the little device over here that I made up to lift that up and out. So it's a little heavier than I'd like it to be, but I'm confined by my lack of talent to work with aluminum, so here we are. Anyway, so that's where we're at right now, and we'll move on from here. Okay, several things going on here right now at once. I took the skin off, and it's leaning up against the wall. I can pick that up by myself. That's nice. In fact, both separate halves are not too incredibly heavy. Anyway, this over here, I went ahead and took all of that padding off. I've got a complete pad now that I'm going to cut into sections. They were just pretty much glued on there as simulation as to what the buildup might be in the various areas, so that I could develop the skin and have the proper spacing. But now that that's done, now I have to put the actual pad in. I scraped off all the silicone. Somebody mentioned that might be an issue as far as the paint is concerned, and I said, yeah, you know what, I need to get that off of there, that RTV silicone, and get that going. So I took it outside and got rid of all the RTV silicone that was gluing down that. And so I have some high heat adhesive that's used mostly for headliners that I'll contact the larger pad down over this the surface before I put the two pieces together. But anyway, I had to do all that and get that ready to go. I've got the bottom all scuffed up and ready to, I'm going to do a little sprucing up here and there with some Bondo. So that's what I intended to do today, but then I got off track as I usually do and wanted to tackle to make sure that I could get this all to work. It had been bugging me because just like the hood, this was very heavy when I added all this extra stuff on here. And I replaced these. I picked up the pivot points in a different location. Instead of before, I had picked up the lower pivot point and then I had it attached way up here and actually wanted to bend the deck lid. Now the deck lid, there's a lot of weight from that pivot point, so I picked up the original pivot point here and extended the pivot point out far enough over here that now that you know, I've got one hand, this can come down, but it also feels like it wants to stay up. It actually pulls itself up now, as opposed to before where you had to kind of jam it up with the smaller pistons and then pray that it held up okay. So here's the smaller pistons that I replaced. I had bought some hood pistons, figuring that, well, the hood pistons are probably a little bit more hardy, but it turns out they're actually, I didn't really look at the ones that I had on my head, but they're actually very slight by comparison. Look at the size of that piston that holds up the deck lid. Of course, the deck lid's steel on the Challenger, and the hood is all aluminum. But anyway, I thought, well, maybe, but that didn't work out. So I ended up using the same pistons, which are the Dodge Magnum hatchback pistons over here, and they worked out fine. So round in the corner, a lot of little knickknacks now. Just got to go around this thing, take a couple laps, and there's a couple little seams here that I'm not happy with. This is a little too close on both sides relative to the seam that goes across the deck lid. I had to, over here on the quarter panel, I had a little extra. It was puffy here, and I was looking from side to side of the car, and I'm going, that certainly looks a little big over here. So I had a template over here that I used when I put these quarter panels together, and I never checked it up high just to see what the relationship was along this curve, and sure enough, it was hitting around here, and it was way out. It was probably about 1.5 inches out, and I had to cut this, slice it, move it in a little bit, and fix that so that it matches the other side. That's much flatter now, and that's going to work out a little bit better. So, like I said, I've got to look at the door jambs a little bit, the door seams, I should say, and fix any areas that might be, you know, a little bit too wide or a little bit crooked looking. So after I get all that done, then it's try to get this thing pushed into the spray room. Of course, that'll be down the road a little bit because I have to do all the work on the inner hood and get the bottom of the hood or the inner hood painted. I have to get the inner skin painted, and before I can put the two of them together and seam them over, get that whole piece put back onto the car, because I'm going to need the hood on the car in order to Bondo it in relationship to the fenders and get everything to match up really nicely with that. So I have to get the car back together in that sense. Also, there's other issues that have to be addressed, as far as I have a brake booster that's bad in this car. Didn't know about it until I got everything back together, and so while I have the hood off, I'm probably going to address that issue, and just, you know, a lot of little odds and ends. So nothing fascinating, just a lot of little things to check off the checklist. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching.